Hi, everybody. Thanks to my 16 subscribers. And for those of you who don't know me and you are watching this channel for the first time, I am Regina Lahab. This video discusses the tragic story of a 75-year-old woman in Indiana who walked into a Tim Hortons and died shortly after a confrontation related to a drive-through order issue. In this video, I break down several things: my viewpoint on the behavior of the people involved in the altercation, my thoughts on how this situation escalated, and why this death did not have to happen. My perspective as someone who has worked in customer service for over 10 years, my perspective on Tim Hortons management, and my own story time because I once worked for Tim Hortons myself. So I'm sharing my insider view of how management operates behind the scenes. This video is both my commentary and lived experience. I'm analyzing what happened to the 75-year-old customer, why it happened, and how customer service culture and management failures can create environments where situations like this become possible. On May 13th, 2026, Anita Grayson died at a Tim Hortons in Indiana shortly after an altercation with two Tim Hortons employees. What I'm going to do is read the article regarding the incident, and this is from the New York Post, and I'm going to have that linked down in the description section below this video. And I'm going to read the article now. A 75-year-old Indiana woman died after she flew into a rage over her Tim Hortons order, took a swing at the manager, and ripped out a chunk of her hair in the brawl that followed. Anita Grayson stormed into the Tim Hortons in Fort Wayne, about 120 miles outside Indianapolis, just after 8 a.m. May 13th, and berated a 17-year-old female worker when she was upset about her drive-through order, according to the Fort Wayne Police Department. Surveillance footage released by the department captured Grayson pointing and shouting at the worker as the coffee house's 20-year-old shift manager stepped in and told her to leave. Police allege that the supervisor touched Grayson when the furious customer stepped toward the young worker. Grayson allegedly pushed the manager and punched her on the left side of her face. Police said Grayson hit the 20-year-old hard enough to leave scratches and send her glasses flying. As Grayson moved closer, the manager pushed her back. Grayson responded by shoving her hand in the manager's face, triggering a melee that ended with the pair on the floor. Miss Grayson then grabbed the shift lead by the hair and pulled her to the ground and rolled on top of her. The shift lead can be seen swatting at Grayson's arm as she is being held by her hair, the department said. Two Tim Hortons employees moved in and attempted to separate them but struggled to get the shift lead's hair out of Grayson's hand. During the struggle, Miss Grayson pulled a chunk of hair from the shift lead's head, leaving a raw area on the top of her head. Fort Wayne police responded to a 911 call of an altercation involving a reported battery and found Grayson unresponsive. Once the fight ended, the employees returned behind the counter and Grayson sat down at a table and made a phone call, investigators noted. About 10 minutes after the fight, Grayson lay down on the floor. Paramedics performed life-saving measures at the scene, but Grayson later died at a hospital, police said. Her cause of death was not disclosed. Grayson's daughter, Tawanda Grayson, said her mother had congestive heart failure and was wearing a heart monitor just a week before the fight as she demanded action. She said, quote, "You should not enter a coffee shop for a coffee and a donut and come out unalived. That is diabolical," unquote, she told WPTA. She continued by saying, quote, "That's the elderly lady. That's not how we treat our senior citizens. We be careful with them. We make sure that they're all right. We don't jump on them and attack them and scare them to death," unquote. The department said it had not planned on releasing the footage, but it felt compelled to counter a dangerously false narrative spreading alongside a partial clip making the rounds on social media that showed only the fight and ended with the 75-year-old on the floor. The Allen County Coroner's Office has yet to rule on Grayson's cause and manner of death, but preliminary findings showed there were no significant contributory injuries, WPTA reported. I want to give my condolences to the family of Anita Grayson. I agree with Miss Grayson's daughter that, quote, "You should not enter a coffee shop for a coffee and a donut and come out unalived," unquote. However, this woman's death did not have to happen. All parties are at fault. The Tim Hortons manager, the Tim Hortons employee, and Miss Grayson, the customer. Next scenes will show some pictures from the surveillance video of the incident provided by the Fort Wayne Police Department. With the scenes, I will give a play-by-play analysis of the video footage by referring to timestamps. The link to the actual video, which is 3 minutes long, will be provided in the description section below. I'm going to include the link to the Fort Wayne Police Department video in the description section of this video. That video shows the entire encounter at the Tim Hortons restaurant. I wasn't able to find an actual image of Miss Grayson walking into the restaurant, so the picture shown here is simply an image of an elderly Black woman with white hair. The main reason I included this picture in the scene is to show an image of a restaurant front counter. From the beginning of the surveillance video, Ms. Grayson walks into the restaurant and approaches the front counter. The front counter is very important because in this situation, that is where she should have stayed. Why does that matter? Because the front counter is the designated customer-facing area where workers come to serve and assist customers. If Ms. Grayson had remained in that area, she could have and should have waited patiently for a worker to come to the counter and ask how they could assist her. At that time, there were 4 workers present based on the video. Miss Grayson should have waited for one of them to approach her. If she had a complaint, which she surely did, she could have voiced it at the counter. If she wasn't satisfied with the response, she could have asked for the supervisor. And if she still wasn't satisfied, she could have simply walked out of the store. She could have gone to another coffee shop and bought coffee. If she didn't have any coffee at home, she could have gone to the grocery store to purchase some and make a cup at home. If she was truly upset, she could have called corporate and made a complaint about the service. Those are the actions of someone who is non-confrontational, and that is what Ms. Grayson should have done. In the surveillance video, from the beginning up until the 0.15 mark, She is standing at the front counter. When she begins to walk away, that is around the 0.20 mark of the video. I will discuss that portion in more detail in the next scene. Now, with this scene, there are a number of problems. For one, Miss Grayson is standing over in what is considered the prep area. That is the area mainly where the employees prepare things such as the coffee, food. They also do it over in the front counter area as well. But this is an employee area. What this employee, which is the 17-year-old employee, what she should have done was politely ask Miss Grayson, could you step back over to the front counter area, please? And then continue the conversation over there. Why is the front counter important? Because the front counter is a wide counter that separates the customer from the employee. It is a protective barrier in case things escalate. The front counter is a sharp contrast from this prep area where they're only separated by a door, and you see how thin and how small that door is. In this scene, the employee has her hands up as if she's trying to explain something to Miss Grayson, and Miss Grayson appears to be angry with her and just want to say that when you are a customer service professional, that you never argue with the customer. You always keep your demeanor very calm. And I know that that can be challenging because there's a saying, the customer is always right. Well, the customer is not always right. However, what you have to do as a customer service professional is be consistent with your demeanor. Be calm. You also be mindful of things such as your body language, your voice tone, your facial expressions. If you if a customer is making a complaint against you, explain yourself one time. If they're still angry, then the thing to do is to say, would you like to speak to my supervisor? 10 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. And then you walk away. Then you tell your supervisor about the situation. And then you let your supervisor talk to the customer. This interaction between Miss Grayson and the 17-year-old employee is on the surveillance video. Starts at the 112 timestamp mark, up until the 126 timestamp mark. So that means that that is actually 14 seconds that this back and forth exchange was going on. That is too long of a time to go back and forth with an angry customer. You can even see from this scene how Miss Grayson's arm is pointing, and she was doing that a number of times during the video, which who she's angry about something having to do with her order, but you can tell by the body language that she's very angry. The key word in all of this, coming from the customer service professionals side, is de-escalation. That word, de-escalation, which is something that these Tim Hortons employees did not exhibit, and a is really showing the lack of training that the Tim Hortons Corporation provides their employees. And I'm going to go more into detail with that when during my story time segment, as someone who once worked for Tim Hortons myself. At the 127 mark of their surveillance video, the shift lead slash supervisor slash manager walks up to Miss Grayson. Miss Grayson is already angry, and the manager escalates the situation even further. There is no de escalation whatsoever in this scene. Several things are wrong here. One thing I can say about the 17-year-old employee is that initially she kept her distance, unlike the manager who came very close to Miss Grayson. The appropriate actions for the manager would have been the following: tell the 17-year-old employee to step aside by saying, "I've got this," and direct her to assist other customers at the front counter or drive through area. Make coffee. Do anything that removes her from standing shoulder to shoulder with the manager. The 17-year-old would have known this if Tim Hortons provided de escalation training, which they clearly do not. The manager could have politely said to Miss Grayson, "Can we continue this conversation over at the front counter?" As I explained earlier, the front counter is the appropriate place for customer interaction. Once Miss Grayson was directed back to the front counter, the manager should have listened to her complaint and said something like, "Miss Grayson, I am so sorry. Tell me the kind of coffee you want. I will make it for you myself, and I will give it to you for free." If Miss Grayson wanted a donut or a sandwich with that order, the manager could have offered that for free as well. She could have explained that this was Tim Hortons' way of remedying the issue and say to Miss Grayson, "We appreciate you and we value you as a customer. Please come back." That is what de escalation looks like. However, in this scene, as you will see in the surveillance video, the manager does not take any time to listen. She walks right up to Miss Grayson, points her finger towards the door, and gestures for her to leave, basically to get out. At that point, considering that Miss Grayson was the elder at 75 years old, a reasonable person would have said, "This is crazy," left the store, and reported the incident to corporate. Instead, Miss Grayson stayed and continued arguing with the employees. The manager is standing shoulder to shoulder with the 17-year-old employee, making the interaction look like two against one. It doesn't look like customer service. It doesn't even look like a place of business. It looks like something you'd see on the street, like a two against one confrontation. At this point, both the 17-year-old employee and the 20-year-old manager are arguing with Miss Grayson. This continues until around the 136 mark when Miss Grayson tries to move toward the 17-year-old employee. The manager puts her hand on Miss Grayson's arm in an attempt to stop her and protect the employee from Miss Grayson. Miss Grayson responds by snatching her arm away. Although the manager was not being aggressive when she placed her hand on Miss Grayson's arm, I still have an issue with the physical contact, especially given that she and the employee were already behaving in a hostile and confrontational manner toward an angry customer. Also, if the manager had not been standing so close to Miss Grayson and de escalated the situation, none of this would have happened. To make things even worse, at the 138 mark, the manager opens the door, leans her body forward, and invades Miss Grayson's personal space by putting her face close to Miss Grayson's face. A literal in your face move. This was an intimidating gesture. A non confrontational customer would have backed off and left the store. However, because Miss Grayson was confrontational, she responded the way she did at the 140 mark. In the video, it showed that Miss Grayson pushed the manager and then punched her in the face, punched her on the left side of her face, as you see from this scene here. Police said that Miss Grayson hit the 20-year-old hard enough to leave scratches and send her glasses flying. Now, what you don't see um, in the video that the police released, they had said that from the surveillance video that they had viewed, that Miss Grayson, after hitting the 20-year-old, Miss Grayson approached the 20-year-old manager again. She moved closer, and when she did, the manager pushed her back. Miss Grayson came at her a third time when she responded by shoving her hand in the manager's face. And that triggered a was known as a melee. The police description of this being a melee is the right word for this, because this was a hand to hand combat situation that developed out of conditions that were not controlled, that were uncontrollable. And the main reason was because because the workers, mainly the manager, did not use de-escalation procedures. And so on the end of the customer side, as far as Miss Grayson, she kept coming at the manager aggressively. So the manager was placed in a situation where she had to defend herself, and by using self-defense tactics, which led to her going out of the prep area and for there actually to be this fight, this struggle between her and Miss Grayson. Even though Miss Grayson was 75 years old, she, from what the video was showing, was strong and was fighting this 20-year-old. And so this fight lasted from the video that was released from the 140 mark up into the 149 mark, when they both ended up on the floor. From the 149 mark up to the 3.00 mark of the video, here is what happens. Miss Grayson and the manager end up on the floor because Miss Grayson grabbed the manager's hair, pulled her to the ground, and then rolled on top of her, which is what this scene is showing. In the video, you can see the shift lead slash manager on the floor while Miss Grayson is holding her hair. The 17-year-old employee and another employee comes into the area where the fight is happening and attempts to separate them. They struggle to get the manager's hair out of Miss Grayson's hand. To the left of the scene, there is a fourth team member in the prep area. This team member looks over at what is happening, then walks away. The video does confirm that four employees were present in the store at that time. The 17-year-old employee and another worker continued trying to separate Miss Grayson and the manager. During the struggle, Miss Grayson actually pulls out a chunk of the manager's hair, leaving a raw area on the top of the manager's head. Eventually, the fight ends. The 17-year-old employee picks up Miss Grayson's black bag and tosses it aside. As the employees walk back to the prep area, the 17-year-old turns around, yells at Miss Grayson, and points towards the door, appearing to tell her to leave. Miss Grayson is still sitting on the floor. At one point, the video highlights a circle showing the hair that Miss Grayson pulled from the manager's head. The video also showed Miss Grayson getting off of the floor and sitting at a table. That's how the video ends in the surveillance video that was released to the public. What the video does not show is that while Miss Grayson sat down at the table, she made a phone call. 10 minutes later, Miss Grayson laid down on the floor. According to the Fort Wayne Police Department, they responded to a 911 call reporting an altercation involving a battery. When officers arrived, they found her unresponsive. She was taken to the hospital where she later died. Her daughter stated that Miss Grayson had congestive heart failure and had been wearing a heart monitor a week prior to this incident. So, this was a 75-year-old woman with a pre-existing medical condition who became extremely angry and confrontational over dissatisfaction with her order, and this is how her life ended. It all comes down to choices. Miss Grayson's daughter said that her mother liked to start her mornings off with coffee and a donut. I want to say this about coffee. I'm a coffee lover myself, so coffee lovers don't come for me. And no disrespect to Tim Hortons, they make good coffee. I can say that as a former employee who has tasted their food and drinks. But this isn't about Tim Hortons coffees specifically. Most coffee contains caffeine, and caffeine is a stimulant that increases heart rate. For someone with congestive heart failure and was wearing a heart monitor a week prior to this incident, drinking a caffeinated product may not have been a wise decision. But more important than the coffee is the fact that this entire catastrophe escalated into a life-ending situation. In the next segment of this video, I'm going to give my critique of the situation and my overall thoughts. I want to say this, and I know some people may critique me because many people believe you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. But whether someone is alive or dead, the truth is still the truth. What I have to say is this. Some people, regardless of age, can be mean, aggressive, or a combination of both. And Miss Anita Grayson's behavior in this situation was completely unnecessary. Miss Grayson was 75 years old. The employee is 17 and the manager is 20. Anita was their elder. As I said before, the Tim Hortons workers played a part in how the situation escalated. But Miss Grayson was the aggressor. Because of that, an investigation was conducted and no criminal charges will be brought against the employees. An elder once told me that every day you live, you are writing your own obituary. I'm of the opinion that there will come a day for each and every one of us that death will cross our threshold. In my opinion, I feel that everyone should ask themselves these questions as they reflect on their mortality. Based on my actions, what will people say about me after my death? What will I be remembered for? Miss Anita made choices that day, and we all have choices and free will. She chose to walk into that store and act aggressively over a cup of coffee. Let's call it what it was, a cup of coffee. That level of aggression has no place anywhere, not in grade school, not in high school, not in adulthood, and certainly not at 75 years old. Her behavior was reckless and unnecessary. Her daughter said that Anita was a God fearing woman and a Jehovah's Witness. I will simply say that her behavior in that moment did not reflect the values that faith traditions, including Jehovah's Witnesses, generally teach about peace and restraint. Every religion has people who live up to its teachings and people who don't. In my personal experience, most of the Jehovah's Witnesses I've known have been people who avoid conflict. The only exception was a girl I went to school with in junior high and high school who bullied me to the point where one day she initiated a physical confrontation. And I held my own, by the way. But that's a story for another day. Aside from her and Miss Grayson, I haven't personally known others from the Jehovah's Witness faith who behaved aggressively. This Tim Hortons location was closed shortly after the incident. Also, in the month of May, there were many rallies and protests outside of the store. However, this location did reopen for business in June, less than 3 weeks after the May 13th incident. As of this recording, the family has hired attorney Benjamin Crump to represent them. Years ago, I worked at a Tim Hortons for only 3 weeks before I was fired from that particular store. Before I explain what happened, I want to describe the management structure at Tim Hortons, which was typical of the store where I worked. My position was team member, and there were several employees who were also team members at that particular location. In the Indiana incident, the 17-year-old involved was also a team member. The next position above team member is team supervisor, sometimes referred to as shift supervisor. I'll use the pseudonym Brittany for the shift supervisor who hired me. At the Indiana store, the 20-year-old was a shift supervisor. Above the shift supervisor role is the general manager, sometimes referred to as the restaurant manager. Above that is the district manager. Now on to my experience. My immediate supervisor, again I'll refer to her as Brittany, started off nice, but eventually she turned into a complete jerk. The general manager was a woman and the district manager was a man. I was on good terms with both of them, and that remained consistent. Regarding age, Brittany was in her early 20s, and the general manager and the district manager appeared to be in their 50s. I had the earliest shift, 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. I was always punctual, arriving at least 15 minutes early, and my attendance was perfect. I learned the food prep fairly well, and I was getting better with the drinks. I worked both the front counter and the drive through areas. Regarding speed, I was fast and on the same level as the other employees. I was respectful towards the staff, and my customer service skills were excellent. I was never insubordinate, even when I was asked to clean the bathrooms and clean the dining areas during the slower periods. During my employment at Tim Hortons, I completed the employee training videos. These videos focused mainly on customer service basics, product preparation, and health and safety policies. However, they do not provide formal or intensive de escalation training. But here's the thing: companies give employees a 90-day probation period for a reason. Who has ever heard of firing someone after only 3 weeks? Their excuse was that, quote unquote, I wasn't grasping or understanding, which was total nonsense. I was terminated after only 3 weeks with no legitimate documentation. Meanwhile, I witnessed several unprofessional behaviors from Brittany, the shift supervisor slash manager. For example, on my last day before the general manager and Brittany sat me down to fire me, earlier that same day, Brittany and two other team members were making little mocking sounds, mocking the way that I talk. I did not respond. However, a fifth team member who was present at the time said to them, quote, you all sound like people in a mental hospital, unquote. That comment shut them down for a moment, but the damage was done, therefore promoting a toxic work environment. There was a team member at the store who had been there for over a year. She told me and some of the other team members that before I started working there was an incident where she once became so angry at a drive through customer that she cussed him out, claiming that he was rude to her. She wasn't remorseful, she was bragging about it. Management knew about the incident, yet she kept her job, but yet I was the one who was terminated. During my time there, Brittany had to take off to have her pancreas removed. Brittany's supervisors said that Brittany announced that she would return to work 3 days after surgery. One of the team members expressed concern about that, and I voiced my concerns as well. Even a customer mentioned that companies should be more understanding and empathetic towards employees dealing with serious medical issues and by allowing them more time to recuperate. I had compassion for Brittany because having your pancreas removed is serious and, and requires real recovery time. What is ironic is that despite my empathy, this is how she treated me. Most of the customers at that location were white, and the staff, including Brittany, were also white, except for one woman of Lebanese heritage. One of the team members who had encouraged me when I first started working there, had said that when she first started working at the store, that her performance was horrible, but she was given time to improve. 2 years later, she remained employed with the company. What was crazy was that right after I was fired, the general manager suggested that she could refer me to another Tim Hortons store in another city. The other store was closer to where I lived and had a black manager and mostly black staff. I thanked her, but decided not to pursue it. Because if I were the manager at the referred store, I would wonder, why are you sending me someone you don't even want at your store? When a manager fires someone after only 3 weeks, especially without documentation or legitimate performance issues, they often try to soften the blow by offering a referral elsewhere because it reduces the chance of, in this case, me filing a complaint, makes them feel less guilty, allows them to frame the firing as not personal, lets them avoid accountability for their own poor leadership. It's a corporate self protection move, not a genuine endorsement. And I saw right through it. In that dysfunctional work culture, the older managers rely on the young supervisor. In this case was Brittany. The young supervisor, who in this was Brittany, sets the tone. The older managers avoid conflict by backing her decisions. This is how toxic young supervisors are protected because the older managers don't want to deal with the mess. My firing wasn't about performance. It was about them protecting Brittany, not evaluating me. Was my dismissal race related? I can't say for sure, but I can describe the dynamics I observed. When I look back on my experience at Tim Hortons, the undertrained young supervisor, the older managers who rubber stamped her decisions, the inconsistent discipline, the mocking, and the complete absence of real de escalation training, I realized it wasn't just a bad store. It was a system with gaps. And when I saw what happened in Indiana with a 17-year-old team member, a 20-year-old manager, and a 75-year-old customer who lost her life, it became clear that the same structural weaknesses I witnessed on a small scale can escalate into something far more serious. My story is not the same as Indiana's, but it reflects the same pattern. A company placing young workers in high stress situations without the proper training, leadership, or conflict management skills needed to prevent situations from spiraling into tragedy. Thank you for staying to the end of this video. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click the notification bell and click all so that your YouTube notifications are turned on in your phone settings so that you can see more of my videos when they upload.